isn't real, it's all in your head, you just imagine it. This isn't real, it's all in your head. There is something wrong with you. This isn't real, it's all in your head. There is something wrong with you.
I started to have mental health problems.
I'm bipolar and I suffer from depression.
Feeling paralyzed, quite honestly paralyzed with fear.
I was spiritually dead.
I'd have thoughts of ending my life.
My symptoms were being paranoid, just highly anxious.
I almost instantly became suicidal.
I had depression, anxiety.
A friend of mine committed suicide 3 years ago.
My son Chris, he's had schizophrenia for a number of years.
I was intellectually incapable of doing anything.
We went to the doctor and she diagnosed me with anxiety and depression. I lost a lot of relationships with family.
We recognize that tragedies like what happened in Aurora and Columbine and Newtown are the result of mental health challenges and cracks in the system.
The significance of one proposal to improve training among frontline law enforcement to recognize the warning signs of mental illness.
We're not preparing the front lines of our community to deal with this problem.
We do not do enough to train them, to have professionals amongst them who can recognize these symptoms.
As local mental health and disability services become increasingly scarce, training officers to recognize the signs of disabilities and to de-escalate a crisis incident involving a disabled person, responding to incidents with individuals suffering from disabilities. This is a public safety issue.
Common sense measures, including a mental health initiative that will address the kind of danger that's posed by the Adam Lanzas who need this kind of outreach and service and diagnosis. But a failure to act is inexcusable.
When looking at the number of mass shootings in the United States within the past several years, at the root problem is usually a mental disorder.
In the case of Jared Lee Loughner, there were plenty of warning signs. Loughner would laugh to himself at inappropriate times. He would clench his fists and make faces.
Loughner was deemed a problem at school by teachers, and Romans says he could have been committed. But there is no record of him ever getting treatment or of anyone calling the mobile acute care teams available here.
June 1st, Loughner was allegedly disrupting his math class. The report stating the instructor and students in the class are uncomfortable with Loughner inside their class and are afraid of any repercussions that could exist from Loughner being unstable in his actions. Why did his behavior not get Loughner into the county mental health system or even on their radar?
Were you trying to be nice to him in case he
Yes.
shot people?
Yes. Was enough done ahead of time to try to short-circuit that danger and to help the individual? And in Loughner's case, the answer seems to be no.
Right now, we need to have a much better system in the United States of sounding the alarm.
And until that happens, you're going to continue to see these, I guarantee you. And in fact, if anything, they're increasing in frequency.
Gifford says they show that Loughner should never have had access to a gun. She used the opportunity to renew her call for what she described as common sense policies like universal background checks.
20 little children, 6 adults.
Unimaginable horror grips the nation.
He was socially awkward. In some cases, he made people uncomfortable. In almost every case, we see warning behavior, and in many, many cases, we see people ignore that because they just don't believe it.
Sandy Hook school shooter had an online obsession with mass killings. It paints an even clearer picture of a young man obsessed with mass murder, and yet another sign that was somehow missed.
This is a guy that is the classic profile of a mass shooter, mass killer in the United States.
Elliot Rodger was advertising to people that he was a threat.
I'd like to just mention is that, I know a lot of kids who are great kids. I know a lot of kids who are a little odd. I know 1 or 2 kids who are disturbed, but I don't know any kids who are that far disturbed.
It's not something that a kid just decides to do one day out of the blue. This is the result of extreme mental illness.
Every single one of these women knew that something was seriously wrong with Elliot Rodger. Every single one of them. Nobody else seems to have.
Teaching police officers how to do better evaluations. If they had crisis intervention team training, CIT training, the likelihood that they would have been able to pick up the warning signs.
I think mental illness is the big elephant in the room right now, and this country needs to get up, wake up, and look at it.
They need to be educated about what mental health is. It needs to be spoken about in schools.
Some of them were too sure on how to approach me or how to speak to me to begin with, because it's just something that's not talked about a lot.
We made this an open subject and something that is asked generally, then we can move forward.
It's time that we opened the curtains, pulled the veils back, and started talking about mental illness for what it is.